Hello and welcome. This is 360 Youth Dialogue only on Third Eye Africa Television. I am Juliet Onra, and it's good to have you join us today on this particular episode. Today we're talking about persons with disability in the midst of conflict. This is one topic we rarely discuss. And when we talk about conflict, we're talking about violence, we're talking about crime, we're talking about, pandemics and all that put together. Now you see how it's difficult for people, living with difficulties, living with disability to survive on their own in Nigeria as a whole. And now imagine that situation when it comes to conflict zones, violence and conflict and all that. And there has been an estimated report saying that 35 million of Nigeria are estimated to be, persons with disability. And this report is coming from Joint National Association of Persons with Disability. You can see 35 million. That's a number we do not want to ignore. And on that topic, we have someone who is, a specialist. He's a public expert and an optometrist, if I got that correctly. Pardon me. He's Dr Osazee Abonlaho. He is the CEO and MD of Treetop Vision Eye Center. Thank you very much for joining us here on 360 Youth Dialogue.
Thank you for having me.
You are the center of intersection of public health and, people with disability, and most common disability in Nigeria are visual impairment. Now, how does that shape the way you see, persons with disability, and how does that shape conflict for these people in Nigeria?
Once again, thank you for having me, Juliet. It's quite an honor to be here to educate the public on this particular issue. Just like you've mentioned earlier, it's really a big problem for Nigerians, and not just Nigerians, for the world at large. And so looking at, just like you also rightly mentioned, visual impairment has, in fact, I will tell you that it's the leading cause of disability as far as Nigeria is concerned. Although globally we have other leading causes like depression and what have you. But here in Nigeria, visual impairment has been seen to be the leading cause of visual impairment, or disability.
Disabilities, yeah.
Right. And so, if that is the leading cause of disability in the country, then you could imagine that it's quite enormous for us, particularly because of the reduction in awareness, the low, awareness level as far as eye care is concerned in this part of the world. So there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to look at. And maybe as we move forward with the discussion, the populace will have a lot to learn about this particular concern.
When we talk of conflict, a lot of people just think, war, fight, and all that. We're also looking at, because I saw should I call it a documentary of a woman? She's actually, I think she's disabled, let's say. I think it's her leg or something. I can't really tell. But she was unable to help herself through the flood. It was a flood pandemic, and she was complaining that if not for her sister, she would have drowned. Now, what is the first challenge a person with disability face when it comes to navigating their way when it comes to conflict? Looking at blind, autism, cripple, whatever, persons with disability in general.
To answer that question, I would say that persons living with disability, one of their challenges, I'll just mention the most, challenging part of that. And what the challenges they face are life-threatening, because imagine a person just like you mentioned, if there was nobody by the side of that person, that lady would have lost her life. So the challenges they have are quite life-threatening. And I wouldn't say if they have a choice, because at that point, if they are left alone, I don't think they have a choice. There was also another video that went around, went viral, concerning one of the kidnapping, was it this kidnapping of a church, of some church
Yes,
members.
I think it was in
somewhere
Kwara.
in the south west area of the country. And there was a woman that, was, I think, visually impaired and couldn't move around. They couldn't even know where, she couldn't know where, where these insurgents were. And yes, that would for the insurgent, it may be a liability for them, and they may just do whatever they need to do to her at that point, either maybe shoot her to death or something, or if they are kind enough, which is very rare, let her go. But mostly the challenges these people that live with disabilities have are more or less life-threatening, and if God helps them, which is very, very, sometimes very slim because of how difficult and how terrible, those that perpetuate conflict, how they are. So it's really life-threatening. And I think that's what I would have to say about that.
Somebody saying this, and you just said it now, that, okay, there might be a liability, especially in that scenario where your loved one also have to run for their life. Nobody is thinking of, let me take this person first, or the trauma or the trouble of, taking another person in a time of conflict. Your mind and your brain is just saying, flee. So at that point, people would often say, probably there will be a liability to the terrorists or to whatever occurring at that point. Do you think it changes a thing? I mean, these people they also deserve to live. They also deserve to be protected, deserve to be free, I don't know. Do you think it changes a thing if they have to be taken care of first?
When you mean taken care of first, like
put in front first?
Well, it would change a whole lot if the dynamics, as far as in terms of policy making, in terms of healthcare accessibility, if these people living with disabilities have such level of attention or such level of concern from relative authorities or relevant authorities, yes, it's going to change a whole lot. For example, if, just like we have said, the leading cause of disability as far as Nigeria is concerned is visual impairment. If the government, ensures that. And let me also shock you or shock the viewers. The truth is that most of this visual impairment are actually avoidable. Okay, so coming from that perspective, if a lot is done to ensure that these diseases or these people, are prevented from actually getting these diseases or the cause of the visual impairment, then it will really, really make a whole lot of difference. It will end up reducing the prevalence of disabled people, in quote now, those that had visual impairment and all of that. And so, yes, I believe it's going to change a whole lot. It's going to change the dynamics. We'll have less liability, whether on the side of, of the populace, because in all, it still gives this, economic burden. I won't mention the part of the country where we have more of this disabled people. If you observe that area, the economic, growth of that area is really reduced. So there's the economic burden, there's individual burden, there's financial burden, there's a whole lot. And so adding to the conflict, if they are exposed to conflict, imagine, just like I mentioned earlier, most times they usually don't survive it. And so there's a whole lot to be done.
Interesting. And you just said that before the whole conflict, that especially visual impairment, it can be controlled. It's something that can be contained before a person moves from, probably a normal eyesight problem to total blindness. So take us through that process. How can we, with public awareness and all that, what are the things people, especially people in communities, what are the things they need to be aware of when it comes to visual care and all that? And other, care that people as an optometrist and a public health expert?
Well, there's quite a lot. Now, it begins mainly from awareness, and that's exactly what we're doing. I'm sure that the viewers would learn a lot from this program. So the first things first is awareness. Let them understand the importance of the eyes. You see, we don't, I always tell people that it's better to, maybe in quote, born blind than you were born and you have your good vision and along the way you lose it. You've seen how beautiful the world is, and along the way, this vision is stolen away from you by a way that could be avoided. And so that understanding first, to take care of your eyes, must be very, very paramount in the minds of every Nigerian. So you don't keep your eyes, you don't overlook certain eye conditions until it gets worse. So yeah, if it starts, like I said, it starts from letting them know to take care of their eyes. Then if peradventure you have an eye condition, don't wait or manage it yourself. You have to see an expert, because the reason is the leading cause of irreversible blindness is a condition we call glaucoma. About 2 weeks ago or thereabout, we celebrated World Glaucoma Week, which is another way to create awareness for this particular disease we call glaucoma. It's the leading cause of irreversible blindness. We have other causes of blindness that are reversible, and the leading cause of that is cataract. So yes, cataract is the number one cause of blindness globally. However, some of them could be reversed and vision could be improved. But there's this other one that doesn't lead or can't be reversed, and that's glaucoma. And with simple understanding of what this disease is, permit me to say, in the rural areas, when people believe that, someone just woke up and can't see or she can't see, they attribute it to some spiritual, so you see the way awareness is very important. So I think there's a lot. If we understand the fact that firstly, there's preventive. In fact, when you ask of the healthcare systems we have in the country, they'll tell you primary, secondary, and tertiary. But in public health, what we prioritize more is the pre-primary. We call that the preventive state, because that's where when you prevent a disease, it's less, it's much more cheaper to treat than when the disease comes in itself. So we prioritize more prevention, and that's where a lot of awareness must come to bear. We must keep taking it. You have your role to play. I, as an expert, have my role to play. We don't need to wait for intervention. When the disease is there, then we now. That's also another aspect, another level of healthcare. But we must prioritize prevention, and I think that's the first point of call for every one of us. As long as we want to contribute to reducing the visual or the costs of visual problems as far as Nigeria is concerned.
Talking about preventive, let's go to communities where when we start campaigns, usually it doesn't start from the communities. It starts from, urban centers before it goes down to rural communities. Now, these people are not aware, and their daily routines sometimes are, endangering to the human health. We talk of burning bush, charcoal, whatever it may be. That's kind of lifestyle that actually threatens their health, and looking at eyesight now. How do you think these preventive measures can get to them, and in zones that are conflict prone already? And looking at also, should I call them victims now, victims of circumstances where probably it might be an incident that has caused this, probably a attack, violent attack, terrorist attack has inflicted blindness on some of the community indigents or something like that. How do you think that can be prevented?
Well, just like you said, the urban centers really we can say, get the resources from the urban centers, because, of course, most persons living in the urban areas, although that may also be questioned, they may have some level of understanding, some level of awareness compared to those that live in the rural areas. Yes, it begins from there. So we can get the resources, get the personnel, and most importantly, take these resources down to the rural areas, because that's where we really have this pandemic, as it were. And so, yes, if we have that understanding, at the end of this, I don't know if how many persons in the rural areas is going to view this program right now. So you see that there's a lot to be done. Now, most times they don't even understand what we say, or we don't understand English language. So how do we do that? I've been in a couple of outreaches where we go to communities, to attend to their healthcare needs. And one of the things we ensure we do is that we do rallies, and we have people that can speak the language of the people, of the community we are going to, so that they can understand what we're talking about. And if that starts, we gather them in their crowd, in their numbers. And before we even start any form of screening, whatever we do, we also give a health talk just to let them know one or two things that they need to know about preventing these things from coming to bear. And another thing that I think is also very important outside the facts, outside individual, efforts, the government has a lot of role. In fact, I wouldn't want to put everything on the government. I started by what we as individuals can do. But the government can come in to ensure that our primary healthcare centers, which are usually located within these communities, are well equipped. Shockingly, we don't have enough health centers,
exactly.
And most importantly, they don't have personnel there that have the necessary skills. For example, an optometrist is a primary healthcare provider, right? So we are the first point of call as far as eye care is concerned. And it will be to your shock, or to the shock of the viewers, that if you go to communities where they have primary health centers, you don't have an optometrist there. You don't even have people that have understanding of what we're talking about here. And that affects the entire population. That affects the people of the community. And the things that they need to do, the simple, healthcare tips, eye care tips that they need to have, or even some form of low-level intervention, they don't have it. So you see that it degenerates from becoming a little concern to a very, very big concern that can make that person visually impaired. So you see that it cuts across everybody, the individuals, and of course the government. There's a lot to be done to ensure that these things are abated.
Indeed, that's true. There really is a lot to talk about. But you didn't take us through the part where incidents occur, let's say an attack of violence, because you said it's one thing that you were born blind, and it's another that you've seen the beauty of the world and then you can't no longer see. But on that part, I want you to help us understand this from your perspective. What is often missing from the way we talk about conflict and vulnerable people? You have understudied, visual impairment and everything. What is the difference? What's the gap? What are we not understanding that can help them when we talk about conflict and their perspective, from your perspective, and vulnerable people?
Well, it's a lot. What I think we need to do, if I understand that question very well, in terms of what we need to do, for conflict-prone areas. Well,
and then vulnerable people.
Yes, vulnerable. I think it begins with securing that community first of all, because, conflicts could have various facets.
Yes.
You could have, even within the communities, people fighting themselves, and that could degenerate into tribal conflict and all of that. So I think securing the community first, let people feel they are safe. I think it begins from there. And if the people believe that they are safe, that if anybody has any concern, there's a system that could help them address it, by law. I think it begins from there. Then, of course, when some inevitable conflict happens, the question is, what next? I think there should also be some form of rapid emergency responses that should be given to such communities. Unfortunately, we still find out that accessibility to these communities is also a challenge. So you see, when we talk about Nigeria's issues, it has a lot of facets, but we try to see, pointing these things out. If this aspect is addressed, then it will cover, it will help in the long run to address these matters. So access to, if an emergency response team is coming now, the question is, how do they assess that community? Sometimes usually go through, the roads are inaccessible and all of that. And so it's a whole lot. There's a whole lot involved as far as this is concerned. And so if each of these aspects are being addressed, then I believe that it's going to be much, much better for those that are vulnerable, because imagine a vulnerable person doesn't have security. What do you expect? So it's just going to get worse. So that's why I had to begin from ensuring that these people are secured and putting them at heart yes, we have blind people already in our mix, or visually impaired persons. The question is, how do we manage these people? How do we manage them? What do we do to ensure that they have better quality of life? Because let me also mention that being blind is not the end of the world, in as much as it's quite difficult, but we have systems that can also help to rehabilitate such a person to ensure that they still have good quality of life. So this is another level of healthcare. We call it the tertiary level. So there's still hope anyways for all of these persons.
Okay, we'll come back to tertiary level of, healthcare. But I was just thinking, and I was like, let's imagine a crisis strikes, and right now, what's the first thing that you're going to do? And in my head, it's to run. But if you're blind, you wouldn't know run to where? Left, right, center. Where am I running to? You might end up, running to your death where you are currently safe. And just to put it to that question, one way I think we can help, visually impaired people, or especially visually impaired people, and probably they said we shouldn't call it dumb, but people who can't hear, is to help them navigate when it comes to conflict scenarios like this. Probably tell them left, right, something like that, or you direct the person. I mean, that's just my take. But after this, we'll take a short break. We'll come back with more on this. Please stay with us.
This is condition to be rescued now because they cannot see, or maybe say somebody is crippled or cannot walk. Somebody is blind or cannot see where to go and hide. It's we that can see and also walk, can also help them when the thing happen.
Of course, they are considered because they are disabled one. They need to be considered because in Nigeria today, you see most of the people, they undermine the handicapped people, but there are those kind of people that we are supposed to embrace and give them rescue first. So I say yes to it.
Of chaos, whereby everybody's running for safety. That person will be left behind. Like the blind, the lame, they cannot move, the blind cannot see. The person with a deaf person will not even know what is going on. And this is a serious situation that people with disability need help.
Thank you for staying tuned. And if you're just joining us, you are quite right on time. But we've been having a wonderful conversation here on persons with disability in the midst of conflict. And we know how insurgents is ravaging Nigeria right now. We're seeing a whole lot of conflict in the middle belt. We're seeing conflict in the northeast, north central, northwest. Literally, the whole of Nigeria is currently in a state of crisis, if I may put that. And it's high time we, look into that. And we're looking at this particular set of people that are, disabled persons living with disability. They're not just disabled, they're living with this disability. How do they navigate on this? And I've been having this wonderful conversation with Dr. Osazee Abonlaho. I hope I pronounced that. Thank God I don't murder your name. We're still talking about persons with disability. Now, due to insurgency in communities, people have to move. Let's say some community or some people who can be able to save their loved ones who live with disability and probably are able to navigate or move to another
Place of safety.
Place of safety, probably an IDP camp or border communities. God, who knows, God may help them. They are able to navigate. All those, how realistic is that for someone, with disability? How realistic is for them to be able to move and navigate through that crisis?
Now, I was just thinking, you asked a question earlier when we were on the break about if crisis happens right now, what do we do? You see, the human mind is programmed to flee when it's endangered, right? So that's the natural state of any human being. If you feel threatened, the first thing, we call it the flight, or fight. So if you can't fight that danger, you have to fly. That's the flight part. Okay, so imagine an abled person, right, having that instinct. You could see, you could move around, but when you are endangered, the first thing that comes to your mind is to run. Right? Now, take that same picture or paint that same picture, or let it come to someone that is living with disability. Imagine the crisis going on within. So yes, they may have that instinct to run. Or where are they running to? Let's look at a visually impaired person, for example. Where would they run to? So it's really, really a whole lot. And you also mentioned something about, my brother is, maybe I have a brother, or I have a child that is visually impaired, and the child is moving around and crisis strikes. The first thing that happens to a human being, just like I said, is to save yourself first. You may be shocked that, of course, this happens in these communities where at night, some of these gunmen just come and, start killing people sporadically.
That's right.
Father, mother runs and leave the children. Nobody wants to know at that instant. It's when you have run to safety, you remember that, I have a child, or I have, and it's really worrisome. It's worrisome. And so this is where a lot of attention must be paid to people living with disability. In other climes, right, there's a lot of help that these people, receive. Yes, they are not stigmatized. They live amongst, the general populace, but they have special considerations. They understand the fact that these people may be limited in certain ways. And when crisis happens, trust me, in more developed climes, they prioritize, these people first. The people living with disability, children, and the elderly. These persons are actually the first point of call. They're the ones that are prioritized in case of conflict, when conflict arises. So I think we should borrow a leaf from what is happening in other climes here in this country. If we start looking at them and not pitying them, because that's also another problem, but giving them, for example, you're entering a vehicle and you see someone that is perceived, living with a disability. I think it's just moral. Your moral conscience should tell you to allow that person first. But we don't have that kind of mindset here.
In Nigeria.
It's deep. It's a big problem for us. So, but we hope that with constant awareness, with constant talk, the government can also play. Okay, for example, in some malls today, in fact, it is part of the plan. If you're building any complex, any building, you should consider people living with disabilities. But how many malls today have that, where you have escalators that could help those that can't use the stairs, or you have pavements that people that are on wheelchairs can, move around? We don't have that. You still see these high-story buildings with stairs only. So someone that they have to carry, so it's a whole lot. It's a whole lot.
You spoke on how they cope here, and looking at Nigeria, we don't really have that mindset of, prioritizing persons living with disability first. Let's talk about in IDP camps. Let's say, okay, probably they were able to find their way, or in some scenario, this particular scenario, it keeps replaying in my mind, because there are some people that probably during the crisis or because of the crisis, they just happen to be with some sort of disability, probably gunshot in the eyes or on the leg or something like that. How do they cope in IDP camps? I don't know if you've been to IDP camps and, see how these people are faring when it comes to IDP camps and treatment.
Well, also very recently, we had an outreach in one of the IDP camps in Abuja. And shockingly, just like it is in every community we do outreaches, we still find that there's a high prevalence rate of visual impairment. In as much as, thank God, we met some at the state where it could be addressed, where intervention could, address that particular problem. But we still found out that some at the verge of fleeing from that crisis, were either shot or they hit their head somewhere and affected their eyes. Some had to, run through vegetative materials, and that's one of the one area where you can easily get infected, and we'll call it fungal, keratitis. It's gotten from vegetative materials, and so if not properly treated, of course, we don't have such kind of treatment or intervention in these camps. And so most times you see them coming with corneal ulcers, and that corneal ulcer will degenerate to a point where the whole cornea is affected and they end up having some form of high level visual impairment. And so yes, the IDP camps are filled with a lot of disability, particularly visual impairment. And the last, like I told you, outreach when they showed that, it actually gave us that statistics, though we're still putting these values together so that we can come up with something, we can show to the public out there that this is the prevalence of visual impairment in IDP camps in Nigeria. Studies are actually going on in that regard. So how can we help them in that scenario in the IDP camps? It's simple. If you go to a typical IDP camps now, one of the first things, in fact, the major concern for those persons is food. Yeah, it's food. And so you see a lot of humanitarian organizations coming there to ensure that these people are fed. Because if you don't eat, you won't survive. So you see that healthcare is silent in IDP camps. Healthcare is silent, except maybe when there's a serious epidemic and, they have to come in. But the major thing happening in the IDP camps today is food, clothing, and shelter. So you don't see more of healthcare there, but we are also trying to see that, okay, let there be centers, health centers there that could help these people, eye centers. Let government understand that, okay, these people, IDPs are actually temporary, so it's not like a permanent base where these people will be all their life. But from what I've seen over the years, it seems as if it's become a permanent stay for these people, because they can't even go back to their homes that they were displaced from. So with that understanding, then the government should be able to ensure that, government or humanitarian organizations that they're already doing very well, they should have, experts, primary health care, experts that will help in ensuring that some of these acquired, health challenges gotten from that crisis scenario is addressed, and it helps. They are able to help these people living in that area to still have some form of quality of life. Even if they can't go back to their homes, but within that place, they should be able to see clearly, move around, and have a good life, at least at that level.
Indeed. I agree with what you just said, because that's actually taking me to the question you already answered when it comes to inclusive response to emergency. Make these people feel okay.
Yes.
Their livelihood have been taken away from them. They are not some kind of beggars. They are not some kind of, the fact they're living with disability doesn't make them less human or less quality of human. These are human. They deserve their right to live, to move, to earn, to do everything. But due to some conflict zones and some conflict scenarios currently in the country, they've been displaced from their community. And ensuring that, okay, even if you're being displaced, the government will provide you food, or humanitarian organizations, civil societies, non-governmental organizations, whatever it is, they're able to provide these people, and also a means of, livelihood, and making sure that those IDP camps are quite okay for people living with disability. We're not seeing some rocky areas, where they have to move people that are visually impaired with fall or something. You're suffering from one and then you're acquiring more injuries and all that. So let's come to where we are getting this wrong. Where really are we getting things wrong? Is it from our policy, our planning, or our implementations?
I would say from the very beginning.
Oh,
right. So the problem begins right from policies. If you ask me, with all due respect to our policymakers, we have very good policies. The question is, how much of these policies are homegrown. What I mean by that is, are you sure you didn't just copy it from one developed country, or you heard it somewhere and you just do some form of photocopying and bring it here? Have you looked at the peculiarities of the country so you could develop policies? That's one of the reasons why researches are done. Researchers in this country is not even given any second thought by government. But that's where statistics, because statistics is what helps policy making. If you understand that, I just mentioned now that visual impairment is the leading cause of disability in Nigeria. I'm sure most policymakers may not know this, because if they do, I think they will pay more attention, to eye health, as it were, right? So it starts from there. And if the policies are made, the next level now is implementation. We also have a problem at that point. So some of the policies that are made, okay, it's being implemented. However, when it comes to financial implementation, it has been hijacked. You just hear that so billion is released for such a thing. And at the end of the day, you don't see the effect. It doesn't get to the grassroots. It doesn't get to where it should get to. And so you see, there's a whole lot. So I wish to really mention this, that everyone that is in authority should be able to see through this, that whatever policies we make, number one, it should be peculiar, it should be unique to our client, it should be unique to, and look on the study. We have a lot of experts. Unfortunately, they are being wooed out of the country by way of immigration right now. A lot of countries are looking for healthcare practitioners, and trust me, they are going in their numbers. So we have lots of them, but we are losing them by the day. The government should understand that these experts must be home, must be comfortable here to be able to help this country. If we lose all the experts, then how do we survive? How do we make these policies? How do we, get unique, peculiar facts that would help the policies we make here in the country? And so if the government is concerned, and those in authorities pay more attention and have the willpower to get it right from the beginning, which is the policy making, and then monitor how it's been scaled to the top, I'm sure our problem will be, at least it will be attended to. I would say solved, but it's something.
At least to a point. But just still on this tone, I want you, if you have the attention of policymakers right now, watching right now, what would you tell them to fix the problem of our policy, especially when it comes to public health and, persons living with disability?
What I would say is simple. Firstly, prioritize healthcare. Prioritize healthcare. We have looked down so much on healthcare systems in the country. And that's why you see those that could afford it usually go outside this country to receive this same healthcare that they have deprived the citizens of the country. So I want to beg every one of us, beginning from the president. I'm not saying you shouldn't go out to get healthcare services, but let's make efforts to develop ours. Let's ensure that our healthcare system is stable. If it is, then I think we are halfway. Into, because most of these disabilities usually begin from a disease, from a problem. And so if we attend to it from the beginning, I think we'll reduce these persons living with disabilities, littered everywhere. So let's build our health systems. Let's start, from the communities. Let's make sure that our healthcare systems, from primary, secondary, tertiary, especially that of the primary, which is the first point of call, let healthcare at the primary level be attended to, because that is where, this begins from. And so attention should be paid to every primary healthcare professional. The optometrist is a primary healthcare professional as far as eye care is concerned. We should have more of them employed in most of the primary healthcare centers so that they can help to, nip on board when they find a pending danger, so that this burden can be reduced. So let's prioritize healthcare. Let's prioritize healthcare.
Indeed, I mean that's a wonderful attention there. But when you talked about tertiary healthcare, I want you to put more on that, and looking at the fact that when they say we're not leaving anyone behind when it comes to conflict, when it comes to healthcare and all that, I want you to put us through that just briefly.
So just like I mentioned, we have primary, secondary, and tertiary. But prior, like I mentioned earlier, in public health, we focus more on preventive. So I would say there are 4 levels. So we have the preventive, the primary, the secondary, and the tertiary. So if a condition can be prevented, and perhaps it happens, a disease condition happens, then the primary level attends to it. If by adventure it can't be attended to at that level, then it gets to the secondary level. And if, of course, it can be handled there, it gets to the tertiary level. So at the tertiary level, this is where, there's, we feel, and most of these people in this live in these communities believe that they don't have hope. There's no hope anymore. But there's a level of care that can attend to any condition they have. Let's go back to, again, visual impairment. So there are levels of visual impairment. There are levels, we don't call them blind also, just like we don't call a person dumb or deaf. So we call them visual impaired. Now, for visual a high or severe visual impairment that impedes mobility, there's still something that can be done. I have visited several schools of the blind, and sometimes I just think that especially our policymakers, those of us in authority, once a while, just go there. Visit such schools. And I think if you have conscience, you want to do something. These are children that are already living with visual impairment, severe visual impairment, but yet they still have good level of life. You see them moving around, you see them doing a lot of things, you see them playing music, doing music, you see them arts, you see a lot of things. So there's still some level of help that these people living with disability, particularly those in communities that have been faced with lots of crises and conflict, there's still hope. And that is where the tertiary level comes in. So for example, in eye care, we have the rehabilitative system. We have specialists that are involved in low vision. All right. So we call them low vision specialists. So what they do is that if there's no vision at all, or perhaps the vision there is so minute, what they do is that they ensure that that minute vision you have, we can maximize it. We can take advantage of that little vision to ensure that we meet your basic needs. We may not be able to do all the things you want to do, but the basic needs of moving around, if your need is to, maybe for these big men, most of them is, I want to sign my check. I want to be able to see what is on my check and all of that, or read my account balance. If that's your primary need, yes, we can maximize that little vision you have to ensure that you're able to do those tasks, right? So we have levels of the healthcare that could help, assist. Right now, technology is also coming in, though for glaucoma, like I said, is one of the leading causes of blindness, irreversible blindness to be precise, in the world. But today, there's a lot of improvement, a lot of research, a lot of work going on to ensure that those that have, okay, let me say this, I have a patient that helped or that benefited solely largely from something that is still ongoing in healthcare. We call it stem cell therapy, though still not FDA approved yet. But he benefited from that. And someone that couldn't see, I don't know if you understand, because we have levels of visual acuity. Okay, his visual acuity was really, really poor, less than 200. But today he has a visual acuity of about 620. 612. That's remarkable, right? So the tertiary systems, though still very, very, very still needs a lot of attention by government,
Mm-hmm.
but we have them. It's just to let people know that there's hope.
Yeah.
Okay, it's just to let them know that there's hope. The level of disease or disability you have has something that can be done, has a healthcare system that could help. So let people be aware of that. Don't think that all hope is lost. There's something that could be done, and that's done at the tertiary level.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that awareness. You know, in a situation where there's in the middle of crisis, or probably you can't access healthcare, there is tertiary healthcare system that should also be imbibed when it comes to IDP camps, or, you know, conflict-prone zone, or any zone at all, looking at persons living with disability generally. And I would want to thank you so much, Dr. Osazee, for joining us here at 360U Dialogue. I mean, I've been enlightened.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I also want to thank the management of Third Eye Africa
Yes.
for this very, very wonderful and laudable initiative. I think more people should hear about this, and the more we talk, the better things become. We can't keep silent. We just have to do what we can do. And that's what you're doing right now. So thank you, Third Eye Africa, for this wonderful initiative. And thank you, Juliet.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. And yes, you've heard it from Dr. Osazee. He is an optometrist and a public health expert. You need to take care of your health. You need to take care of your, you know, you don't have to be a person living with disability to, you know, take care of your health per se. And to everyone living with disability, it's not the end. There is also tertiary health care for you. And if there's tertiary health care centers by the government, I think life will be made easy for persons living with disability, especially in conflict-prone zones. Thank you for joining us here at 360U Dialogue, your only and favorite show here on Third Eye Africa Television.